Good afternoon, everyone. We are pleased to welcome you all to Crossfire, the annual schools debate of SRCC. This is the Junior Grand Finals, and this debate is in collaboration with the Social and Political Research Foundation. We're extremely thankful to them for being our knowledge partner for this event. So, SPRF aims to help steer discourse in a way that reflects the changing times of our country. They work to bring into focus evidence-based, non-partisan, and objective policy research, right? And headquartered in New Delhi, India, they work through research, outreach, and events to deliberate and discuss the idea of an India where public policy is strengthened by fact and not steered by opinion. Our judges for this final round are from SPRF, Mr. Jitendra Bisht and Miss Michelle Patrick. I'll start by introducing Mr. Jitendra and then Pavni can introduce Miss Michelle. Mr. Jitendra is a senior analyst at SPRF India. He has worked at the confluence of development, practice, and policy research in India for over half a decade, previously with organizations such as the International Committee of the Red Cross and Care India. He holds a master's in conflict analysis and peace building from Jamia Millia Islamia, Delhi. His work on climate change, sustainability, and climate induced conflicts has been published by ORF, the Observer Research Foundation, Down to Earth, and South Asia Democratic Forum, amongst others. We're glad to have you with us, sir, on panel. Pavni, you can go forward.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be introducing Ms. Michelle. Ms. Michelle is the Digital Communication Manager at SPRF, focusing on making policy accessible and engaging for young Indians. She is the Communication Management graduate with experience in NGOs like Gunj and Teach for India, and is presently building out a youth public policy knowledge platform from scratch. She also has a background in state and national level debating, winning the 2019 National Debate Contest Speak Up at IIT Bombay's Mood Indigo. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our first participant, Anvita Jaipuria.
Just to inform everyone, I'll be going for first and again second. I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. What is the first thing we learn in school? To argue, to question, to express, and to justify opinions. If a child is taught to voice their opinions in the four walls of a classroom, why not expand this to society? When a student doesn't agree with something, he or she should have the right to oppose it in public, spread awareness about it, and most importantly, be heard. This allows the child to become an active member of society and use his or her learning, knowledge, and character, all sculpted by school in a real-world scenario where political issues shape lives. They say that the youth can't bring about change and the youth is useless, but in many cases, the youth has impacted and bettered societal systems. Teenage boys in Devon wore skirts to school to fight against the gender stereotype of clothing and achieved in breaking down the sexist policy where only girls could wear skirts. The climate change movement intensified after only one 15-year-old Greta Thunberg skipped class to protest about her country not following the Paris Climate Agreement. London students, after staging a protest outside the school over discriminatory uniform policies and union flag placement, brought an end to these racist policies, allowing students of minority ethnic background to feel more integrated in a holistic environment of school. Whether it's the BLM movement, the advocacy of gender rights, or protesting against physical exams during the COVID-19 pandemic, the youth has brought about significant changes. The like-minded youth fighting for a cause doesn't only bring about change, but also brings about a sense of responsibility in the child to speak up, take action, politically achieve, and if not, at least be a part of the political process. It inculcates in the child leadership and organizational skills. They say that the youth isn't associated with politics, but so many of the children are born into politics when they belong to minorities or oppressed sects of society and to constantly fight off injustice. They deserve a voice to protest against it. Children must be taught to follow intelligent dissent rather than passive agreement. Now, looking at the same thing from a diametrically opposite point of view, the phrase that it's important to note is intelligent dissent. The students that have not completed their entire education do not have complete understanding of political and social systems. The reason they must complete their education before moving into dissent organization is so that they have the skills to properly understand all components of an issue they are protesting against. The schools are meant to prepare the students for the future so they can knowledgeably combat such problems in an informed way. Further on, because these students aren't completely informed, they are unable to take realistic approach to political problems. We don't live in a utopian world, and only when one has certain exposure to experience can he or she understand how to reach a balance. This exposure and experience is not available to school students as of yet. Moreover, school children are only 12 to 18, who are 12 to 18 years of age, haven't fully matured mentally or emotionally. After all, their children, they because they are given the right to organize dissent, they can do so out of personal incentive, not the ideal where they want betterment of society. For example, recently children protested against online examinations, but these examinations were deemed necessary by the school board to assess, examine, and understand, but the students still protested for personal gain. It can be concluded that them having too much power in events allows them to get away with whatever they wish to without understanding or taking into account the gravity of the situation. I would like to end by saying a right always comes with accountability. But when the school children organize protests or dissent, in no way are they held accountable or responsible. The school or the board, in this case, is held accountable and responsible, and children can exercise their rights without consequences or without impugning action. This is why these situations can become rogue and move into unnecessary chaos, which we cannot have. Thank you.
Thank you, Anvita, for such a fine speech. We have our next participant, Aryavir Agarwal.
3, 2, 1. Pan. There are various stages and aspects in our lives, but schooling tends to be the foundation of what we are. It is our prerogative to inculcate and support habits and activities which would help in children becoming the best versions of themselves. Quoting Indira Gandhi, the power to question is the basis of all human progress. Supporting the right of children to dissent holds high benefits both for the present and the future. Firstly, the power to dissent would bring in better changes and a more holistic form of development. This is because the communication wouldn't remain single way anymore and the school would receive feedback from the children. This could be done in the form of writing articles and school council and student bodies. It would help in making things better for the children as they could share their concerns easily with school authorities. Children could also raise awareness on issues like climate change and force the schools to ensure they fight against it. Secondly, to organize and dissent is a basic human right that strengthens the thought of democracy among children. The freedom provided to these children would further develop into a core system of thinking. These children would soon grow into adults, and the habit of dissenting would come in to be very useful. Be it them becoming future leaders and policy makers, working in a corporate firm, or simply inculcating it into their children. It would help them become more tolerant, have more openness to change, and also increase efficiency as it would lead to better plans and deeper thinking. On the other hand, we see various ill effects by supporting the students to dissent. Though people feel that dissenting is necessary, there are several factors involved when we put school children into the picture. Firstly, the need for children to dissent is very minimal, right? We see that not a lot of school children have concerns that are political or ideological, right? We see that the issues that they're facing are more on a school level, and we see that these issues that are political are the ones which really can't be supported because they don't have full factual knowledge, right? Giving full freedom to children who are growing up and haven't even fully matured yet could turn out to be very dangerous. This is because these children would eventually try and exercise these powers to achieve the most level of comfort possible for themselves, right? We see that then they wouldn't think about the consequences and only look at the advantages of what they get. It would lead them to questioning the most basic form of authority, like maintaining a dress code. Secondly, school children are of an age where they have a very vulnerable mind and they don't have full factual knowledge, right? They don't have full factual knowledge and they don't have full factual information. The very reason why people dissent is to put in their views in order to make things better. But in this case, we see that children would form several biases at a very young age, which would eventually become ideologies, which could also turn out to be very irrational. We also see that all of this could create conflicts among children, which would actually create moral issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Aryavir. Now I invite Darsh Puri to open his side of case.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to tell you that I'm going to speak for the motion first and then against the motion section. You can start the timer in 3, 2, 1, go. So, welcome everyone to the circus called the freedom of speech in India, where the ringmaster is the politician, the strongman is the politician, the magician is the politician, and the clown is the politician. We're all spectators watching their amazing mess in awe and occasionally getting called up to help out in an act. And if we pull something funny, we're easily sidelined and hushed. So in this volatile environment where every form of disapproval has quite often been quashed, I think children should be the ones to rise up. And I have a couple of reasons. Today's society is the most polarized, probably corrupt it has ever been, and each and every party has some vested interest or hidden motive in any action they take, any law they pass, any movement they launch. Children in this scenario have the purest and most unfiltered, uninfluenced opinions, provided that they are given unfiltered information, which is the biggest threat to them. I believe that with proper education, students will soon instinctively turn to dissent. And we should do this as they should be nurtured to ensure that their mind remains open and accepts every ideology. This means that they should accept the positive and try and help solve the negatives propagated by the government, society, or any ideology. But for this to work, something has to change. But I myself have opposing views regarding India's polities than my parents. I'm pretty sure you can guess who supports what by now. But even coming here and saying this today has required me to think about the risks. For if they can book a school in Karnataka for 9-year-olds performing an anti-CAA play, what harm can they cause me or my family? The Constitution itself leaves the freedom of speech in absolute, for they can deny it for the security of the state. They interpret the word state to mean themselves, but in reality, we the citizens of the state, we have just invited them to temporarily run it. And our dissent is to enable the security of the state, not to deny it. Now, against the motion, I'm not going to argue that children don't have the intellect or mental strength to engage in such activities, as they do. This generation has the access to the most information ever and has the ability to harness more knowledge than probably anyone in humanity's history. And I'm not going to get into the ways children can be convinced about the subject, as I am a child and I know how hard it is to convince any child about especially any subject which is regarding logic. It is more about becoming opinionated at a young age. It kills the human spirit of understanding, as it has for all our elders. We forget how to think in any other way, and this creates an immense social and mental burden on us as we grow up. You start to feel like nothing is going right in your country, and you become emotionally attached to an institution which is a billion times larger than you, and you have no effect on it. Hence you fall into despair. And now when a generation like this grows up, they forget the dissent they had once championed and fall into the comfort of conservatism, as they are now afraid of change because it never comes. The vicious cycle causes our children and youth to actually become more like those they oppose, and the youth to actually become more like they oppose. And it's this excessive desperation which is the worst effect of dissent at a young age. Why do you think the only thing probably all our MPs share is an age above 50? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Darsh, for such a fine speech. Now I invite Jania Mahajan.
Yes. 3, 2, 1, start. Good afternoon, everyone. My motion for today's debate is that this House supports the right of school children to actively organize and dissent in schools. But what exactly does dissent and organize mean here? It means to formulate student clubs, to be part of councils, to organize events, and to stand out and give your opinion on various issues inside and outside the school. Now, talking about as to why this right needs to be protected, I'd like to group my argument into two major points, which are as follows. Point number one: change in oneself leading to development and progress along with awareness generation. Well, the school system has taught us to blindly accept what we are spoon fed rather than formulating our own opinion, our own ideology. Nevertheless, by providing the students opportunity to develop, to organize and dissent in schools will lead not only to personal development and progress, but also it will lead to students being able to identify what their fundamental rights are. Point number two: change in society. Well, as discussed above, we as students have learned to go with the herd ideology, and we have never made our own viewpoint. However, dissenting makes us realize the situation, the problems around us, and hence we are able to bring about a change in the society. Because at its very after passing school itself, we are eligible for voting, and hence if the young generation in school itself becomes an informed voter, it will definitely help in bringing about a change in the society by forming a better democracy. Now, talking about as to why the right to organize and dissent should not be given to the school children. But before I proceed with the topic, I'd like to clarify one thing. To whom are we giving this right? To toddlers who are in primary schools, or to students who will pass their schools? I'd like to discuss both the aspects, but first coming to the second aspect, if this right is given to the high school students. I'd like to discuss that in one major point, that is it a right or weaponization of right to dissent and to organize? You all must be remembering the happenings of JNU where the students organized an event for the Parliament Act convict of Afzal Guru by calling it to be a judicial killing, which led to a row with the ABVP student, which further led to communal hatred, violence, even in the campus and even in the Patiala House court. Now, what does this prove? This proves that the right to dissent and to organize can lead to weaponization of the same, and hence giving this right to school students with full liberty can be horrific. Now, if I talk about the second aspect, if this right is given to toddlers, will they understand this right at an age where their brain is constantly evolving? They may end up understanding the meaning of dissent in a completely wrong manner, which can have horrific outcomes as well. Hence, I oppose the right to give dissent and to organize in schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Janya, for such a fine speech. Now we have Krisha Gupta.
Start in 3, 2, 1. It is not enough to simply listen to student voice. Educators have an ethical imperative to do something with students, and that is why meaningful student involvement is vital to school improvement. Good afternoon, everyone. The motion before the House today supports the right of school children to actively organize and dissent in schools. School is the first social environment a child is introduced to. And teaching children to be blindly obedient is harmful, because when you start closing your eyes, people will not let you open them. And so I believe that students should have the right to dissent and to organize. No school policy is perfect. Everything can have changes and every rule can improve. And nobody will know better than the people who are being affected by it, since any judgment will have a direct impact on the students. The reasoning will be supported on raw impact. School is a social setting. We can see it as a miniature version of a country where students is an organized and comprehensive manner should be able to dissent the policies. And when we talk about dissent, it does not mean creating nuisance. It means expressing yourself. It means expressing the dissent. And when we break through the walls of school, we're expected to behave in a completely different way. We're expected to make decisions and take a stand. How would a person take a stand for themselves if they've been taught to be blindly obedient? Right to dissent will rather let them come out with their own opinions, which will make them good organizers. And someone rightly said, blind obedience to authority is the greatest enemy of truth. Students of all ages value the opportunity to shape the rules by which they live. When they voice their opinions to shape the rules, students are more likely to understand the rationale behind them, and they will comply with them more willingly. In addition, the inclusion of student voices in the decision-making process and procedures are therefore likely to be stronger if students are allowed to voice their opinions. But again, they say every coin has two sides. These rights can also be harmful. Well, let me explain you by giving you all an example. Let's imagine that I have this glass of water with let's imagine that I leave this glass of water with a 5-year-old child for 10 minutes. What do you expect would happen after I come back? Probably water everywhere, glass broken, or maybe the child must have caused himself wounds with the broken glass. Similarly, if we provide school students with the rights such as right to organize and dissent, they might misuse it and they might end up harming their own future. So at this age, they're not responsible enough. What I mean here is that school students are immature and less experienced to challenge the decisions made by a wiser and a much more experienced committee. They might starting running away from work and education, and they might starting ruining the accommodative and collaborative environment of schools. And that is why school does not provide such rights to the students, since they might start using these for unfair reasons. And school tries to inculcate obedience and discipline so that the students do not misuse their rights when they go out of the school in the real world. And these rights can actually hamper their academic and co-curricular skills, because everything they find uncomfortable, they try to go against it, which might make them revolutionary in a negative way and which may act foil with the democratic setup of governance. I'd like to conclude by saying the work of meaningful student involvement is not easy or instantly rewarding. It demands that the system of schooling change and the attitude of students, educators, parents, and community members change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Krisha, for that fine speech. We'd now like to call upon the next speaker, who is Krithvi Sharma. Krithvi, you can start whenever you're ready.
Yes, I guess you could start the timer. Democracy is a morally the most justifiable as the best form of government and is accepted and followed by the majority of governments around the world. And as a major part of it assures the right to express one's opinion freely. And keep in mind, all of this education is being taught in educational institutions, or to say schools. How ironical would it be if I say that schools are teaching democracy while at the same time not providing a democratic platform? Nobody should be acceptable of such systems. When you look at the long history of beings, you will see that more heinous crimes have been committed in the name of obedience than they have been committed in the name of rebellion. For far too many teachers in too many schools around the world, the ideal student is still someone who is quiet, obedient, and who obeys rules set by the institution without questioning upon their existence. These are some of the most important influences on how a pupil feels, thinks, or even reacts. As somebody who themselves was not given a democratic right is more likely to be a non supporter of government systems. And do we absolutely want that? No, we do not. So, if we want an equal society, we must begin to provide them the right to dissent from the very place where opinions are formed. And yes, we all know where opinions are formed from, the schools or educational institutions. Now, I will be going against the topic. If our democracy is to flourish, we must have criticism. If the government is to function, we must have dissent. But simply, this does not imply in case of schools or educational institutions. As someone rightly said, it's a place where opinions are formed. So, to ensure the correct opinions to be formed in the correct manner, dissent is not correct. Since the students are still at an age where they are forming their opinions, it unknowingly becomes hard for them to draw a rightful line between correct dissent and incorrect defiance. Opinions are subjective. For example, take a scenario where majority people accept a certain decision, but a certain population does not. Do they expect the people in power to change decision based upon their opinions, or otherwise they will call it a violation of right to dissent? This should not be correct or considered correct. Rightly so, no, it should not be. Students should definitely be taught about the correct way and basis for dissent. Until the time they are in the process of opinion formation, who can assure that the format of dissent is correct? Different people come with different behaviors, and sometimes violent behaviors can be viewed in case if their demands are not fulfilled. And such forms of dissent can never work as ideals for students. So till they reach a age of maturity, which statistically for most people is after the education is completed, they should not be given this right. I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Krithvi, for that fine speech. Judges Akshat is back in the meeting. He was supposed to go first in the speaking order, so he'll just deliver his speech now. Akshat, are you here?
Yes, sir. Just give me a second.
All right, perfect. This is Akshat Tiwari, who was supposed to go first. Whenever you're ready.
The main purpose of schooling is not to produce a herd mentality. It is to provide for the fullest possible development of each learner for living morally, creatively, and productively in a democratic society. Education involves examining issues and thinking about possible resolutions, and dissent helps students become more capable of critical thinking and complex analysis. Dissent is a crucial component of a student's civic consciousness that gives them the power to help a democracy thrive. Dissent and activism act as a bridge that provokes deliberation and challenges the status quo to re-evaluate and consider perspectives that refuse to be marginalized. The lack of dissent will result in us becoming an unquestioning, moribund society. When the youth unite against a cause, it is because they believe there is a gap between theory and practice, between ideal and reality, between what is and what ought to be. Climate change, for example, has long been a pressing issue, yet today it is synonymous with teenage activist Greta Thunberg due to the awareness she has spread regarding how the current climatic condition is far from the ideal scenario. Teaching students how to dissent is not fomenting upheaval, rather, it is expanding students' understanding of civic life. Student activism should be in line with the purpose of education. However, supporting the right of students to actively organize and dissent in schools has significant drawbacks. High school student activism has caused deep concern as due to student immaturity at times peaceful demonstrations have led to physical confrontation, damaged property and police arrest. Without proper guidance, half-baked ideas and incorrect interpretations can result in dangerous activism promulgating fallacious beliefs, thus posing a threat to society as a whole. Youth activism is considered as a travesty due to the lack of understanding of theories and the menial foundations it is built on. Youth activism does not always lie in merit and is often part of the current spectrum of societal disjunction. College and high school students today desire too much power that they are trying to assert influence upon situations in which they have had little to no experience. Taking the example of Greta's climate activism once again to illustrate my point. While Greta's climate activism is well intentioned, it is plagued by ad hominems, lacks a proper structure and framework to solve climate change, as well as meaningful dialogue aimed at giving a constructive analysis of the timelines and guidelines for the average person. In the times of social media, smartphones aided with internet have become rife with propaganda, which often promotes violent extremism and hate speech and ultimately undermines democracy. Students are susceptible to this sort of propaganda by supporting the motion, the right of school children to actively organize and dissent in schools. Uh, sorry. By supporting the right of school children to actively organize and dissent in schools, we would be not benefiting society, rather it would be to the detriment of society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akshat, for that speech. I think that was quite insightful. Next, we'll resume with the speaking order that we were following. And next speaker up here is Madhur, whenever you're ready.
You can begin in 3, 2, 1. Good morning, everyone. I will first be speaking for the motion. Dissent is about concern, affirmative action, and standing for what we believe is right. We are a democracy, and thus every child should have the right to speak up for themselves and a chance to disagree with those around them. Some of the biggest leaders around the world have started as student leaders, like how Indira Gandhi formed the Vanna Sena. It is well known around the world that true leaders are born from college politics. So I believe that we should allow students in school as well to have the right to dissent. The more we muzzle dissent, the more is the need to dissent. If we don't protest against how free speech is being controlled, over a period of time, the democracy itself will wither away, and the government will become bolder in exercising control. And children in school shouldn't be taught to be blindly obedient, but to question their surroundings and speak up for what is right. Voting eligibility does not mean active participation. Today, we need active citizens, not passive criterati. If students have strong opinions about real issues that we face, why not give them an opportunity to voice it? As teenagers, since our media consumption is very high, our outlook is broader than previous generations, and our awareness of issues around the world is high. Through social media, we can connect with the world and are able to access the opinions of a very diverse community, allowing us to formulate a well-informed opinion, and we can use online forums and petitions to easily organize protests. Malala Yousafzai and Greta Thunberg represent this awareness and this recognition of leadership that can come even from teenagers in school. I strongly believe that when you stand for a cause that resonates with everyone and is a pressing issue, age does not matter. I will now be speaking against the motion. As students in school, we all have a lot of pressure to excel in academics in the eyes of our guardians, while subsequently maintaining an active social life. The question is, do students in school have the bandwidth to get into issues that are beyond their current priorities? Also, children do not always have the access to all the right information. Even my friends and I often rely on social media to attain information about current issues. But this is not a reliable source, as it can often be false or just rumors spread by people. I believe that the older you get, the more diverse your surroundings and company becomes, resulting in various opinions from people from all walks of life, which just isn't happening at my age. Nowadays, we all live in very nuclear families and are surrounded by the same 3 or 4 adults every day, because of which our opinions tend to only follow one path. We also have a very sheltered life while in school, and because of this, children usually create dissent devoid of a holistic perspective. Every dissenter needs to put forth his or her arguments in an inspiring and influenceable way in front of an equally capable adult decision maker. Students may struggle to do this, and this isn't beta testing, this is real life. Dissent and organized protests may invite physical harm or arrests, expulsions, and general discipline. And wouldn't this affect young minds adversely? In conclusion, I believe disagreeing is okay, but actively participating in organized protest as a student in school is taking it too far. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madhur, for that speech. We now like to call upon the next speaker, Nivan Jain. Nivan, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, can you see me?
Yes, we can clearly see you and hear you.
Yeah, I'll be speaking for the motion first and then against. 3, 2, 1. School children should not only be trained to live in a democracy when they grow up, they should have a chance to live in one today, says Alfie Conn. First, I'd like to speak for the motion. A change is necessary for a progressive India where democracy and secularism are not just mere words, but the actual pillars of the Indian society. As stated by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, I do not want India to be a country in which millions of people say yes to one man. I want a strong opposition. The right to dissent is not explicitly stated in the Constitution, but rather is a civil right that arises out of how we understand good citizenship and thriving democracy. Dissent allows for a proliferation of views on the good life. It sparks conversation and ignites change to better align practices and policies with the wishes and needs of the people. It keeps democracy vibrant. A recent example is Greta Thunberg and her famous dissent line, "How dare you?" Teachers in schools should encourage their students to play an active role in the planning, organizing, and implementation of various projects, functions, events, fests, drives, campaigns, fundraisers, and professional development opportunities. By doing so, the children become competent in interacting effectively with others, thinking critically, acting democratically, and behaving in a socially responsible manner. Students must learn about the responsibilities. Students must learn about the responsibilities of citizenship that correlate with their right to dissent, and where else would they begin other than a safer haven like school? The nation is what the children shall make. So the sooner we empower them to think, organize, and express, the better the future of the nation shall be. Now I'll be speaking against the motion. Learn and enjoy as much as you can while you are young, since life becomes too busy later. Children organizing events in school often face time management issues and miss out on classes. This majorly affects their studies. Since these activities have a huge impact outside the campus, many students feel compelled to attend to these projects to the detriment of their studies. If the right to dissent is allowed in school, it will substantially disrupt the orderly operation of the school and can even create an immediate danger of causing students to commit an act that is unlawful or in violation of school rules. If the protesting laws on students are revoked, they will create havoc and thousands of children will rise for leadership. They may even land a coup on the authorities. Overt dissent often threatens the social harmony in groups, and minority dissent triggers social rejection and relationship conflict. Legally, children can make their own decisions when they reach adulthood. So why fret now? You just don't know it yet, but school is one of the best places on this planet to exist peacefully. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nivan, for that speech. Our next speaker coming up is Devika Bhasin. Ria, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Am I clearly audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
All right. You can start the timer in 3, 2, 1. Benjamin Franklin once said, "Without freedom of thought, there can be no such thing as wisdom, and no such thing as public liberty without freedom of speech." Good afternoon, everyone. I will first speak for the motion. This house believes that school children with the right to organize and dissent can change the future, and I have 3 points to support this. First, the right to actively participate in school is brimming with opportunities for students. Learning how to express their opinions diplomatically prepares them to battle grave adversities in the future, and leadership skills are instilled in them from an exceptionally young age. Moreover, students that might be underconfident have a platform to overcome their insecurities and organize an initiative for the betterment of tomorrow. Secondly, students comprehend meritocracy through the organization of an event. They learn to appreciate talent in their fellow students, and they provide a fair opportunity to all rather than just their allies. And lastly, the right to dissent in schools can lead to change. I will pick up a recent example. Students at London's Pimlico Academy staged a sit-in protest over a strict new uniform policy banning hairstyles that block the view of others and hijabs that are too colorful. And pupils accused the school's management of racism, claiming the new policy would penalize those with Afro hairstyles and Muslim students. The policy was taken back. The House would like to conclude by stating that it is the youth that will lead to change. The right to dissent and organize only assists the process of building a safer world for people to live in. And that is why these rights are non-negotiable. Now against the motion. Freedom of speech is a representation of equal rights, only till it is in control, because otherwise it becomes a catastrophe. While the right to organize and dissent in schools advocates a comprehensive environment, it has three counterproductive drawbacks I would like to highlight today. Firstly, when students organize an event, they lean towards involving only those students with whom they have positive relations. A system of meritocracy is thus not exhibited, and those with talent will fall short. Secondly, freedom is always directed exactly to responsibility. If students misuse their freedom of speech to voice opinions that contradict the school rules, it can cause penalization. Misuse of dissent can lead to conflicts between students and disrupt the learning environment in school. I'd like to highlight an example. A mob of students in Jammu and Kashmir came together without masks and protested against examinations during the pandemic. This is an example of protest against something truly useful to them. Moreover, almost all protesters were not following basic COVID protocols, and they risked their lives over the right to dissent. Lastly, when a person is given the right to dissent, their temptation to misuse it awakens. They can thus say hurtful things to someone weak and cause emotional trauma, making him a victim of bullying. The House would like to conclude by saying that the complete right to dissent will only endanger several other rights of school students, and that is why rights are brimming with demerits.
Thank you so much, Ria, for that great speech. Next up, we have Ayden Sharma. Ayden, whenever you're ready.
I'm always ready. You can start the timer in 3, 2, 1. The goal of education is not to fill a vessel, but it is to kindle a flame of thought, knowledge, and most importantly, action. Good morning, judges, Miss Michelle and Mr. Jitendra. I, Ayden Sharma of Amity 46, would be first speaking for the motion. And I would argue that children in school should be given a right to dissent. The three arguments that I would be covering are that how activism ensures holistic development, how dissent promotes a wider dialogue between government and citizens, and finally, why it's never too young to dissent. First of all, the traits of being courageous, decisive, and mature are all awakened and imbibed by activism. And mind you, judges, these are the traits that we look in for a good and responsible citizen. Next, the common thing between the Fridays for Future by Greta Thunberg, as many speakers mentioned, and March for Our Lives by Emma Gonzalez, is that they all echo a discussion and deliberation on public policies. And that is exactly what the aim of dissent is. Nextly, it is never too young to discuss and to dissent, because we have created an imaginary line of 18 years. Whenever you step out of that line and you become 18 plus, you are thought to be an adult, but it is not so. To make sure that we are creating responsible citizens, we need to ensure that we, throughout the schooling, we give them thoughts, we give them the knowledge to dissent and the opportunity to act and speak out their words. Lastly, I would say that we've all come here to debate and discuss political and social issues. But should our debate go in vain? Definitely not. We should propel ourselves and our children to action. Now I would be turning tables and would speak against the motion, and I would argue that children should never be given a right to dissent actively in schools. The three arguments that I will again put forward is that how children can be misguided in the wake of activism, how schools are educational institutions and not political ones to raise dissent, and lastly, how learning environment is tremendously impacted by dissent. First of all, schools are educational institutions and not political ones. If you remember the 1968 Olympics where the Black Power movement was started, I think it was not a suitable platform to raise that issue. Just for the reason being that it was a platform for sports and athletics and not for political dissent. Similarly, schools are also neutral bodies, and when their children express their views and dissent against government policies, it also damages the reputations of schools themselves. Lastly, children can be misguided in the wake of activism. One speaker also mentioned how social media and peers can misguide a person, and that is coupled with fake news and also various agencies that are on the verge of misguiding children. And we should not allow children to dissent because they have not yet formed their opinion. They do not have a well-formed mind and mature thought process. That is why even the voting age is after 18 years. Lastly, the learning environment is also disrupted as lots of children, school staff, and administration turn their eyes into what the protest is and not what the study is. Hence, it is not essential to hold placards and chant slogans to be aware. It is more important to learn and understand rather than dissect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayden, for that ever ready speech. Next up, we have Vivan, who we are very excited to hear. Vivan, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, before I start, am I audible?
Yes, you're clearly audible.
3, 2, 1. This is a debate about whether students should have the right to organize dissent. Firstly, why students should have the right to dissent in schools. Dissent allows for the opinions of school students to be heard. Dissent promotes divergent thinking and enhances the quality of decision making and leads to better innovation. Dissent is also a pivotal element of democracy and democratic education, as it is an active challenge to the majority view or consensus. So it is essentially a minority view. Dissent both liberates and stimulates our thinking, and it does so whether it's right or wrong. And democratic education is important because it includes self-determination within a community of equals, as well as values such as justice, respect, and trust. Now, if this right is infringed upon, students may feel that their well-being is being threatened. And the only limit to this right is when dissent causes rioting or school walkouts, when the effect is detrimental to all. However, this limit still does not apply to student dissent, because student dissent is fundamentally for the benefit of all students and seeks to improve upon pre-existing norms rather than rioting or extreme methods, which are again detrimental to all. And in the past, students have changed many things for the better using dissent. Students mobilized against the chief secretary in Bengal in 1902 when he tried to prevent students from participating in political activities. Students also participated in the Quit India movement. Now, conversely, on why children should not have the right to organize and dissent in schools. There are many problems with student dissent. Students may lack maturity on what to protest against. They may protest against arbitrary things or things that have been proven and are agreed to be beneficial to society, thus making the protest pointless and even unfavorable. Misguided student protests can be influenced by parties with vested interests. Thus, the protest is not for the benefit of the students, but rather for the benefit of a third party. Students may also not be able to constructively dissent. Now, if this happens, the message or the purpose for the dissent may not be effectively communicated, and they will not be able to achieve a desired outcome, often because they are too idealistic or because they cannot properly communicate their message. Encouraging dissent can be counterproductive to the school's timeline on delivering an education. And the school cannot maintain an ideal learning environment for other students. Finally, dissent can be counterproductive to the cause. Rather than organizing dissent, students can use the time and the resources to actively solve the problem. While school students should be equipped to understand dissent, they should not be encouraged to practice it until they have the understanding as well as the maturity of how to wield it as a powerful tool in the real world when they can make proper change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vivan, for that speech. Next up, we have Nivedita. Nivedita, whenever you're ready.
Am I visible and audible?
Yes, you're clearly visible and audible.
All right. In 3, 2, 1. Dissent is a practical application of critical, independent thought and moral courage. It must be one of the end goals of liberal education. Ladies and gentlemen, this House supports the right of school children to organize and dissent in schools actively. I would like to make 3 broad points to support my argument. Firstly, dissent is essential in a democratic setup, be it through children or adults, as nowhere does the Constitution say that the right to speech and expression is not a right for school students. Secondly, school students in today's age of information revolution are well aware of their rights and have a sense of what's right and what's wrong. We must create a society that has opinions and beliefs, and this must start from school itself. Way back in 1969, the Supreme Court in the United States ruled that students do not shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at their school gate. Keeping this in mind, should school students in the US not protest against pervasive gun laws endangering lives through mass shootings in schools? Greta Thunberg, ladies and gentlemen, since her school days itself, is leading the global movement for the climate through her protests and school strikes. Take the example of Malala Yousafzai, a fearless future shaper who has combined purpose and imperative in setting out her vision for a better world and is bringing girls' education rights for the poor across the globe. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, governments have a responsibility to act, but in the face of their inaction, we should all be able to mobilize, be it students or adults. Therefore, I firmly support the right of school children to actively organize and dissent in schools. On the flip side of the motion, schools have a responsibility to maintain a safe learning environment for all the students, learning and all being the two keywords. Schools have a crucial role in shaping children, in shaping kids and instilling discipline values, providing them with the basic building blocks so that they are ready to face the challenges when they become adults. Ladies and gentlemen, dissent in a democracy is more than welcome. We are not discussing dissent, but the key here is dissent by school children, minors, who get easily influenced and carried away and do not have much sense of what's right and wrong. There is a fine line between dissent and disruption. How would we ensure that dissent in schools does not lead to disruptions in their studies, thereby impacting the primary purpose of school learning? The question here is, would children be able to evaluate the justice of laws, distinguish effective dissent from a simple rabble-rousing? There have been multiple instances of universities becoming political battlegrounds, leading to infighting and even police entering university premises, affecting not only their education, but also their lives. Schools need to ensure that students can build strong foundations and not create battlegrounds. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I do consider that many of the protests are for noble or favorable causes that might lead to a better future for children, but it is the parents' job to fight for that future right now. Schools have a vital role in shaping our future, and I believe they should continue to focus on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nivedita, for that very insightful speech. That brings us to the last two speeches of the day. This has been a very, very interesting day to hear to so many young children speaking. I'd now like to call upon Ariman Upadhyay whenever you're ready.
Okay, before I start, am I perfectly audible and visible?
Yes, you're perfectly audible.
Just one last thing. I will be speaking first for the motion and then against.
Cool.
3, 2, 1, start. I will start my speech by proposing the motion and explaining the need to dissent in school. In 1962, the 36th President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, famously said, "Education is to let a person have knowledge by realization and not by feeling." Fellow debaters and Honourable Chair, is it not undeniable that learning isn't and can't be limited to just the four walls, and that practical, pragmatic education and the will to do the same independently is important, much more so than theoretical one? Let me also inculpate you with the fact that I and each student living today is aware of each and every non-democratic action and affair happening in the present, because this type of pseudo-democracy has become more often than geo in a phone, and therefore it's self-evident that these students should be allowed to stand up and protest against these moves, not just to better the present, but also from the best future. By the Indian Constitution and UN Charter, every pupil in our mighty nation has been given the right to freedom of expression. Now, ladies and gentlemen, why should it happen that as soon as we step into the premises of our school, our rights suddenly and seemingly are abolished in a matter that should be adjudged unconstitutional? We have seen student leaders who have shown their competence to transmogrify the course of history by their protests in action. Take the example of Greta Thunberg, who with her pertinacity and love for nature inspired students all over the globe in the remarkable school strike for climate movement. Take the example of Nobel Prize winner Malala Yousafzai, who empowered millions of girls in Pakistan and worldwide to be allowed to be educated. With this, I would ask the assembled people to understand the fact that democracy of today is a synonym of dictatorship or forever. And therefore, the students of today are the direct personification of the need for change. Today, LGBTQ people don't have rights. The lower castes have pseudo rights. The women have unequal rights. And finally, we, the children, have non-existent rights. Now, acting as the self-antagonist, I will explain the motion. I would explain why the motion is extremely inharmonious with the positive development. While students of schools and colleges stand up lion-heartedly to protest against the school or the government, they forget that by doing so, they are not unsettling not just their own education, but also that of their fellow mates who might not subscribe to their justification of organization and dissent, which affects them and the society, as the students are our future in a way more antipathetic than any other. One might argue that education without practice is useless. To them, I say practice without education is dangerous. This is justified by the effect of social media and yellow journalism, which makes the student bake thoughts in the most burnt of manners. Hence, they lead them on a wrong path. We say that child is the father of man, but it is this school where the child gives birth to a man. Now, my fellow educated ones contradict me if I'm wrong, but is it not obvious that if pupils, instead of studying and preparing for the future, get down in the school, shout, stand in dissent, the future of our nation would be raised in a manner more violent than any other? Would it not be that the most affected ones here are the students themselves, who are losing and abandoning their right to education to practice a bit too non-essentially mature practice? Hence, while in this school, a student should not be allowed to organize and dissent, but rather should be blossomed into a figure that helps the world in the future, who learns how and when and why and where to protest, in a way bringing industrialization in the most sanguine of manners. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Araman, for that speech. And now I'd like to invite the last speaker of the day, Anoushka Singh, whenever you're ready.
3, 2, 1. Children, other than simply being minors, are also citizens with civil and political rights. And since they do not have the right to vote, active dissent is one of the few ways they can participate in a democratic system. Society is allowed to actively organize and dissent on social causes. So school, being an institution that serves as a microcosm for the larger world, should seize their invaluable opportunity of being an educational environment, and instead of punishing, should teach students how to voice their opinions efficiently and respectively by means of a protest. For example, if a student is voiced his or her concern only to have it forcibly suppressed instead of given its due consideration and validation, then not only would an invaluable lesson on how to disagree respectfully be missed, but moreover, the child could have an irrational escalation in their behaviors due to frustration in communicating their emotions. This could ferment into a more negative and violent form in the future. Therefore, children should not be suppressed when it comes to student dissent, but guided in the correct, gracious, non-violent way to do so. Secondly, if children are meant to be the future of the world, then to not listen or subdue their sentiments and concerns would not only be short-sighted, but also set a bad example for future leadership. New thoughts and new ideas are to be encouraged. Not allowing the student to protest is subduing their voice, which is against the very tenets of democracy and would hamper that future citizen's ability from completing their civic responsibility when they grow up. This would not only be detrimental to the citizen itself, but to the country's welfare as a whole, as each citizen's contribution to democracy makes us a democracy. Hence, children should be supported and not prevented in participating from civic life. Now, on the other hand, the purpose of a school is to be a safe environment for children to learn their curriculum in an apolitical way so that they can later go on to form their own opinions. Student protests would hinder this because first, when having a student protest organized by students, there's a high chance of the children being pressured by their peers into supporting a message which is contradicting their viewpoints. In many cases, the situation many become where students are not attending the protest due to its political matter, but due to the impact it may have on their social standing and the validation they may get from other social groups by attending it, thereby turning what one may call an expression of free speech into an expression of compelled speech. Secondly, children's minds are more malleable and impressionable, and hence there's a larger chance of the students adopting a mob mentality when it comes to dissent by blindly going along with the common opinion. Students who engage in these practices are less likely to be genuine and more likely to become desensitized to disasters, viewing them as personal moral dilemmas rather than widespread tragedy. Furthermore, due to this mentality, children will indirectly be having opinions enforced on them, which compromises their individuality. This will be turning what one may call social activism into performative activism. Thirdly, children under the age of 16 have scientifically not reached mental maturity, so the part of their brain which concerns logic and reason isn't fully developed. Now, not only is this a reason for children to not be able to protest on those topics which are inherently adult, but also our protests cannot be conducted on school grounds. For an education to be effective, it has to be continuous, rigorous, and uninterrupted. So those protests which are more agitated and violent can not only be a great disruption to what is meant to be a learning setting, but can also endanger the safety of a child, which is and always will be paramount. Thank you. I conclude my statements.
Thank you so much, Anoushka. That brings us to the end of what was a very interesting session where we heard a lot of views on whether student dissent in schools is a viable method of dissent or not. Now I'd like to call upon our two honorable and very venerable judges, Michelle ma'am and Jitendra sir, as they are part of SPRF. They're working on a lot of topics which are very relevant to this debate. So I think we can all benefit from hearing from them about how this debate went and about SPRF and the motion in general. Please, sir and ma'am, whenever you feel.
I'll let Michelle start because she's got more experience in debating, in colleges and all herself. So I think the quality of the debate, she's a better judge. And then I'll follow up with what I have to say.
Okay, I was happy that Jitendra unmuted himself first, but I'll go. I mean, I'll just say that it was wonderful to be able to judge this, and there were some very compelling points that I don't know if I would have myself come up with, and hearing them from so many different people that come from different, backgrounds and walks of life was a very enriching experience. Also, some very riveting arguments, compelling voices. In fact, I think you guys are also convincing when you speak, and it's very heartening to see that. And I mean, I'm actually going to refrain from giving my own opinions on this topic, but I think you guys did a great job showing both sides. I think a turncoat style debate is a little bit challenging, and I think you guys pulled it off, especially in the short time limit that you had. I mean, I guess if I would say anything would be that usually debating events tend to have a very pretentious rules, I guess, like Queen's English and all that. And it really is just like a reflection of your research skills and dedication more than anything else. So usually good to stick to that, but don't let it be like a reflection of your actual debating skills at all. So I guess those are just my only points that I was thinking of. But for the most part, I was very enamored by the different voices and the spirit of the debate contest. And honestly, it was very hard to judge and score you guys. So wonderful job on that, and good luck for all of your I hope very many future platforms that you guys will be debating and presenting on. Jitendra, you wanna add?
Yeah, I think you covered most of the points I wanted to say. But I think I was pleasantly surprised by how well structured the speeches were. Most of the speeches, I think. It was a close fought battle, the way I see it. Some of you were really, really good with, emphasizing an argument, and in fact, choosing what to emphasize for the, firstly. So that's surprising and also, pleasant at the same time, because I didn't expect, a teenager, because I have been a teenager. I don't think I was this compelling or this, articulate at this age. So that's a great thing you guys have, got going for yourself. And we've tried to score you as fairly as possible, because it was quite hard to judge with, a lot of people, especially in terms of structure, bang on. Research, some ups and downs here and there. Modulation also, a lot of you were, able to clearly present your arguments. So I think all the best. Closing remarks, I'm not really made for, closing remarks, which is why I should have gone first. In fact, now that I think about it. But I think you got a great future, for yourself, all of you ahead. I see some of you doing well at MUNs, and even, if you go for political science, let's say, then, maybe becoming, good writers, because the writing is all about articulating, what you know. It's not necessarily about how deep your research is. I mean, that's an added advantage, but the way you articulate what you know, how and in this day and age where, we see education and knowledge clearly, concentrated at a certain level. There's an eliteness to how accessible knowledge is. So that way, if you can articulate your points so well and in such a simple and accessible manner, I think that's brilliant at this age. So all the best, and cheers to the team, at SRCC for organizing such a great debate. That's me. That's all I can say.
Thank you so much, Michelle, ma'am. Thank you so much, Jitendra sir. We'd like to extend a formal note of gratification for both of them for taking out time of their busy schedules, partnering up with SRCC, helping with both the motions and adjudication. We'd like to thank all the participants for taking time out from their schedule and participating. I think this was truly a very competitive, very close, and very insightful debate. With that, I think we come to the end of the finals. We'll be starting our live stream on Facebook where we'll be declaring the results. So please stay tuned for that. We've sent the link to the Debating Society Facebook page on the WhatsApp groups. And thank you so much, guys, for all your time. Again, a huge shout out to SPRF for partnering up with us. We're very, very glad to have you work with us on this event. Thank you so much, guys.